In 106 C, a single Roman legion marched into Petra and erased 5 centuries of merchant empire. Within 2 generations, the Nabatean kingdom vanished from history, not through war, but through the systematic dismantling of the trade routes that built it. At its peak around 50 BCE, the Nabatean kingdom controlled something worth more than gold: the roads. From southern Arabia to the Mediterranean, every frankincense shipment, every bolt of silk from the east, every jar of myrrh, it all moved through Nabatean hands. The kingdom wasn't vast. It never needed to be. Petra, its red rock capital carved into cliffs in what is now Jordan, sat at the crossroads of 4 continents' hunger. The numbers tell the story. Archaeologists estimate Petra's population peaked around 30,000 people in the 1st century CE. The city wasn't built for farming or fishing. It was built for profit. Merchants, scribes, camel handlers, water engineers, entire classes of people existed because trade flowed through Nabatean territory. A single caravan of Arabian frankincense could generate enough tax revenue to fund a city's infrastructure for months. The Nabatean kings understood this. They didn't conquer land through legions. They conquered through logistics. Their currency was everywhere from Egypt to Rome. Their administrative system, records, contracts, tax codes, was sophisticated enough to rival any Mediterranean power. They built cisterns in the desert so reliable that some still function today. They negotiated with Ptolemies, with Parthians, with Rome itself as equals, not subjects. For nearly 500 years, since roughly the 4th century BCE, they had maintained this balance. This wasn't an empire that looked fragile. To any observer in 100 CE, the Nabatean system appeared permanent, as solid as the stone facades of Petra itself, as durable as the trade winds that pushed their caravans north. Yet within a single generation, something would shatter this certainty so completely that historians would later struggle to explain why the kingdom's collapse left almost no resistance behind. By 90 C, the Nabatean kingdom was already breathing shallowly, though no one in Petra seemed to notice. Rome had been tightening its grip on Arabia for decades. Augustus had failed to conquer it outright in 25 BCE, losing an entire army to desert and disease. But failure only postponed the inevitable. By the reign of Trajan, Rome's emperor had made a decision. Arabia's trade routes would be Roman routes. The kingdom's last king, Rabble Roman II, understood the pressure. He ruled from 70 to 106 CE, 36 years of calculated submission. He minted coins bearing both his face and Rome's titles. He paid taxes. He sent no armies. He was, in every practical sense, already conquered. Yet the internal signs of collapse are harder to read. The great tombs stopped being built around 80 CE. Petra's water systems, which had sustained the city through centuries of desert heat, showed signs of neglect in the archaeological record. Trade was already fragmenting, some routes shifting north to Palmyra, a city Rome could more easily control. The Nabatean merchant class, which had built an empire on independence, now faced a future where their independence had become liability rather than asset. Rabble Roman II died in 106 CE, probably knowing what would come next. He had no heir Rome would recognize. He left behind a kingdom wealthy enough to seem worth taking, weak enough that taking it would cost almost nothing. Rome had learned patience, and in the spring of 106 CE, the 3rd Cyrenaica Legion, commanded by a governor named Cornelius Palma, marched south into Arabia with orders that would erase 5 centuries of Nabatean power before a single significant battle was ever fought. The Nabatean kingdom didn't fall in battle. It evaporated. In 106 CE, Cornelius Palma's 3rd Cyrenaica Legion, around 5,500 soldiers, marched into Petra without recorded resistance. Within months, the kingdom's administrative structures simply ceased to function. Tax collectors became Roman officials. Merchant guilds lost their independence. By 107 CE, coins bearing the Nabatean king's face stopped circulating entirely. The archaeological record shows no siege, no destruction layer, no mass graves from conflict. What we see instead is abandonment, deliberate, swift, almost surgical. Petra itself, the rose-red capital that had dominated Arabian trade for 5 centuries, was formally annexed as the new Roman province of Arabia Petrea. The kingdom's desert trade posts, Hegra, Dumatha, the caravan stations that had funneled frankincense and myrrh northward, were absorbed into the imperial system within 2 generations. By 140 CE, a visitor to Petra would find Roman soldiers, Roman administrators, Roman tax records. The Nabatean merchant class didn't vanish. They adapted, became Roman subjects, some entered provincial service. But the kingdom itself, the political entity, the economic autonomy, the 500-year accumulation of power, was gone as if it had never held dominion at all. Yet something extraordinary survived in the ruins, something that confused every archaeologist who examined it. Inscriptions in a language Rome was trying to erase, carved into tomb walls and temple stones, as if someone knew future generations would need proof that this world had existed. Within a generation of 106 CE, Petra stopped being a city. It became a ghost, inhabited, yes, but hollowed. The Nabatean merchant class didn't vanish overnight. They scattered. Some fled south to Yemen, where Sabaean kingdoms still controlled frankincense routes. Others stayed and became Roman functionaries, their names Latinized in provincial records. A few simply disappeared from history entirely. The economic hole was immediate and catastrophic. Roman legates redirected Arabian trade through Red Sea ports they controlled directly, Berenice, loose cum, cutting out the middleman entirely. Archaeological surveys of trade goods from the 2nd century CE show a 73% decline in non-local pottery reaching Nabatean sites between 106 and 150 CE. Coins stop circulating. Markets contract. The city's water systems, engineered over centuries to sustain 30,000 people, begin to fail from neglect. But here's what puzzled scholars for decades: the inscriptions didn't stop. Nabatean script continued appearing on tomb walls and votive stones through the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, long after Petra had become just another provincial town. Why would people carve their language into stone when that language was being officially erased? When Roman administrators were renaming streets, rewriting deeds in Latin? 2 theories emerged. The first, resistance through memory. Ordinary Nabateans, merchants' widows, former caravaneers, were documenting their lost world for descendants. The second, more unsettling, they didn't believe the empire was permanent. They couldn't imagine that 5 centuries of prosperity would simply vanish, that Rome's grip would hold. They were wrong about one thing, but archaeologists would later discover something in those inscriptions, something hidden inside the language itself, that suggests they knew something Rome desperately wanted forgotten. What remains of the Nabateans is scattered across the desert floor like evidence at a crime scene, and archaeologists are still reading it like detectives. The city of Petra itself survived, though transformed. Roman coins replaced Nabatean currency by 107 CE. The great caravan routes simply rerouted through Roman-controlled ports at Caesarea and Alexandria. Within 50 years, nobody was getting rich off frankincense anymore. Rome was. But the inscriptions tell a stranger story. Nabatean rock carvings near Hegra, dated to after 106, contain grammatical oddities, deliberate errors, phrases that seem to hide meanings in plain sight. Linguist Leila Neme identified these anomalies in 2018. Were they encoding descent, preserving forbidden knowledge? The scholarly debate remains unsettled. Archaeological surveys between 2010 and 2022 found no evidence of violent resistance to Roman occupation, no mass graves, no fortified last stands. The conquest appears almost administrative, yet written sources from that same period grow suspiciously thin. Josephus mentions it. Dio Cassius mentions it. Then silence, and entire civilizations collapse barely documented by Rome itself. The coins tell us about trade. The pottery tells us about daily life continuing. The inscriptions tell us about something else. Memory trying to preserve itself in a language Rome could read, but perhaps not quite understand. We found what happened to Nabatean power. What we haven't found is what happened to Nabatean consciousness. The moment a merchant kingdom understood it was already dead and decided what to leave behind for us to find. The Nabateans learned what empires still forget. Control of commerce is more fragile than control of armies. Another file is already open, the mystery of how Venice lost its monopoly to a single Portuguese explorer. If you want to know how power disappears, subscribe to the archive.